भद्रं कर्णैभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागं सस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, Thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge and bliss. Salutations unto Thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Dear friends, we are very fortunate today to have the presence of Pravrajika, Vrajaprana, a very well-known teacher of Vedanta who has written many books. It is some like Vedanta primers and some very good expositions of difficult Vedanta topics about Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Holy Mother. She has been at the Santa Barbara Center of this Vedanta Society of Hollywood. She has spoken here before a few times, and so all of you know about her. One important thing you can see that you see she is associated with so many great Swamis of yesteryears in the Vedanta movement in America. And today's lecture we got it, it was providential. Like in Providence, things happen providentially. So just I learned through a source that she is coming this side and then she has to go to New Jersey next day. So I thought, let me try. Very difficult to get her, not. She is as such very easygoing person, but because too many invitations and lot of it is not easy to get her to come for a lecture at the 11th hour. But sometimes there is you get a lottery, You just buy ticket thinking that I may get, I may not get. But as the story goes, that the God told finally a man who was praying to God that let me get lottery, I am so poor, I am dependent on all that money. So the God came in his dream and said, oh my dear, at least buy a ticket. Otherwise, how can I help you? So I thought, let me at least buy the ticket, let me make a call. And then let's see. And well, the lottery god smiled on me and she said yes. And so, and she picked up this very nice topic about her reminiscences of all the senior Swamis, how one learns from them, not just the bookish reminiscences, this happened and that happened, but what we should be learning from their life. She actually came in contact with the Ramakrishna order way back in 1967, got into the monastery, into this convent in 1977, and then after a decade or so got her monastic vows, and then she has been going all over in US and other countries as well to preach Vedanta. Her that many interfaith groups, interfaith conferences, and one very prestigious organized, in the Dalai Lama conference. So she spoke at that also. So a very illustrious nun, and so I am looking forward, like you all, to listen to her ways to learn from the senior Swamis. So without standing between you and our great speaker, I request her to please proceed with her talk. Thank you very much.
It is such a pleasure to be here again after too long of a time. You know, everything that I really learned about Vedanta, I learned from these great sadhus. I read a lot of books, I write articles, but everything that's really important is what I learned from the senior sadhus that I met in my life. So if there's one thing I want you to take out of this talk, because we're all being in here together, your problem is you're going to have to shut me up. Because once I start on the topic of these sadhus, I don't want to stop. Because there's nothing that actually brings me more joy than kind of milking the memories of these great sadhus. And what they've told me, what I've learned from them, how they yelled at me, screamed at me, just shut me down. It's become very sweet, as I was told 50 years ago, oh, this will become very sweet to you. It's like, I don't think so. It has. So I encourage you to imprint all the memories that you hear from this wonderful sadhu here. Imprint them in your mind and your other sadhus that you've known in your life. Imprint them in your mind. Go over them. Remember them. Remember that you don't always have them, that they leave you. Sometimes you get no notice. And then, or you get notice, but then by then it's too late. It's like, oh, I wish I could have asked him. I wish I'd known. I wish I could have shared this with him. Don't frickin' wait. Take the opportunity to really learn from these sadhus that we are so fortunate to have in this country. In India, good luck. Good luck. If you're initiated by the president of the order, you are very blessed, but you get initiated and that's it. You can't go back and talk to him about your spirit, or the vice presidents. There's millions of people in line in front of you and behind you. To have this kind of sadhu sangha is such a rare fortune that we have in this country and in the other satellites in Europe and in South America. You don't get it in India. You can't be with your guru like that. There's not an opportunity. There's the press of people, it's too much. So the one good thing, you might think that we're out in, Timbuktu as far as spirituality. We get the cream. And take this opportunity to have their holy association. Don't think you can get it tomorrow because you may not be able to do it. And he might tell you something so important that day that it like, oh my God, I'm so glad I went there then. I'm so glad. Now, let me tell you, in 1967, I was a 15-year-old brat. I was an anti-war activist against the war in Vietnam, and I personally had to stop it myself. And every morning I would wake up and think, I haven't worked hard enough to stop the war. So I belonged to this organization called Women Strike for Peace, where we would go to different churches, and we were leafleting the churches to let people know that we were going to have a march down the big street in town, State Street. So we had organized this thing, and I was paired with this guy because he could drive, and he had a car, and I didn't. So we had leafleted the Catholic Church in town, handed all these things about the anti-war march, and then he said, he was probably 5 years older than me, but seemed very grown up. He said, let's go up to the Vedanta temple. And I said, what's that? And he said, oh man, it's this beautiful place, and they got a big parking lot. It was like, parking lot. Because the goal was to go to all the cars in the parking lot, lift up the windshield wiper, stick in the pamphlet about the march against the war in Vietnam. Mission accomplished. There are probably 200 cars in there because this was the time of peace, love, rock and roll, and Eastern religion. So the Maharishi had already come out, so everybody started coming out to, Eastern mysticism, spirituality. So it was packed. And the guy, whoever he was, said, well, let's go in there. And I said, I remember being down below and looking up the parking lot. I thought, it doesn't look like a church. Can we go in there? And he said, yeah, it's really cool. And I said, cool. And we went in. And the Swami speaking was Swami Prabhavananda from New York, who was very, very thin. And he spoke in a high, thin voice. And I couldn't understand a word except God. It was, even Bengalis couldn't understand what he was saying. He kind of talked back like that. And he seemed very austere. He was so thin. And I thought, I don't want to go to a place where they're fasting. I'm not into that fasting kind of stuff. It's like, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. So, but then the little Swami next to him thanked him. And then they went off after the end of the talk, went to the bottom of the place. We all went, they went, and then they stood and shook hands with every person who came. Nobody did pranam in those days, believe me. So everyone went and shook hands, and Swami Prabhavananda was very sort of formal. He kind of went, and he was very kind of kept himself back a bit. And I went next to this little Swami next to him, was kind of like round and soft. And he just put his hand around my hand and looked at me and smiled, and I burst into tears. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I was humiliated. I was just so embarrassed because, first of all, I had a line of people behind me trying to get in. Second of all, I was like, stop the war machine. We got to end this. Bomb the Pentagon. It's like, the whole idea was like, boop, that's over. That chapter is done. I could have cared less at that point. It's like, what? I just stuttered out after just crying. I said, you're so beautiful. I'd never seen a radiant smile like that. He just seems to he just smiled. It was like I'd never been exposed to that kind of tangible holiness where he can actually transmit purity. It was like, I just stuttered out, you're so beautiful. And he laughed. And then I almost couldn't move. And then I kind of went down the stairs and I thought, whatever he's got, I want what he's got. So I kept finding anybody that I knew who had a driver's license. Can we go up to that Vedanta temple? That's just a really cool place. Let's go up there. It's like, what, it's just this building. So the next time, I just kept coming and coming and coming. And remember, I'm a hippie girl. Got the hair out to here, flowers, sandals, the whole deal. And there was we didn't have a bookstore at that time. We just had this little table where people sold, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and Thus Spake, and we sold incense. And I went up to get probably a little Thus Spake because with my $1 a month allowance, I could do a 25-cent Thus Spake. So then I went up there, and one of the people said, "Oh, you're back." I said, "You seem surprised." She said, "Yeah, we thought we were too square for you." And I said, "No, I love it here." She said, "Oh, we'll have to ask you down to the convent sometime." And I said, "Convent? What convent?" She said, "We have a convent right down there." I said, "Where? Where is it?" She said, right down through the parking lot. I said, "I'm going to join." And she went, ha, 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 ha. Showed her 10 years later, I did. 10 years later. I had to grow up by then. But it was like, I knew then that it was like all my past ideas were just like over because they seemed totally irrelevant. Because I realized that this person, I'd been trying so hard to inflict peace on everybody else, but I didn't have it myself. So I asked Swami, I had an interview with Swami Prabhavananda. The first interview was really, in retrospect, completely embarrassing. Because, you're 15 years old, you don't know anything. I knew nothing about protocol. So he said, "Do you know how to sit cross-legged?" So I put I'm wearing a skirt, right? I put my legs up, and he said, yes, okay. And then I said, "Swami, how can we bring peace to the world?" And he just looked at me, and he kind of smiled and laughed, and he said, "You have to have peace in your heart first before you can give it to anybody else." And I was like, got the message. So it's like, okay. And I kept coming back. And I'd heard that he was really hard to get initiation from. And I'd heard that he would say to people, "You'll have to ask me again and again and again," because his guru, Swami Brahmananda Maharaj, was really tough to get initiation from. So I heard you just have to keep at him. So I thought, okay, I'm 15 years old and I want to realize God by the time I'm 20 for sure. So I know if I really put my mind to it, I can do it while I'm going to school and I can do everything. I get my BA at the same time, right? So I thought, okay, I'll start now. So I asked the senior nun there, Vrajaprana, I said, "Can I start asking him? Is that okay?" And she said, she was from Chattanooga, Tennessee. She said, "Oh, sure, honey, you can start asking him." So I went he was in the living room, and I sat down and I said, "Swami, will you initiate me?" And he went, "Sure." And I went, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, really, I will initiate you." But he wanted me to wait until Ramakrishna's puja, and I had to go to Hollywood. I didn't drive. And so I ran home that night. As I got home, I said, "Dad, you got to take the day off work. I'm getting initiated." It's like, "You have to take the day off. You have to drive me to Hollywood." It's like, okay. It's like, he knew nothing about initiation. It's like, take the day. My father loved his work. He has to take the day off work because I have to get initiated. It's like, okay. Sure enough. And I was terrified because he seemed immensely old at that point. He must have been like 60 or 70, something. He seemed enormously old, and I was terrified that he would die of old age before I could get initiated, and then all would be lost. I'd never have another chance in life. So I was so fortunate to have someone like that, because he would make it so obvious that the presence of God was so real, that it was tangible. I said, I was a kid, so I said, "Swami," I said, "have you realized God?" How inappropriate, how stupid. And he looked at me, he put his head down, and I saw two little tears coming out that way. I don't know whether it was of mirth or joy or pity, but it came out. And he put his head down, and he looked up at me, and he said, "Yes, and you can too." So I thought, that's the man for me. But the best thing is he made it like, of course you'll realize God, of course, because that grace is there. He said, it's closer than the palm. It's like a fruit in the palm of your hand. A fruit in the palm, but he would always go. That index finger would be out. Practice, practice, practice. Meditate, meditate, meditate. He could scold people like it was taking your skin right off your bones. And once he accused me of something that wasn't really accurate, but I was too terrified and to do anything about it. And I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I felt like one of those bugs that you find under the rocks, like, ee. I felt like that. And I realized later how much karma had just like wiped right off the map. In a sense, part of what he said was true, and then one of the nuns straightened him out. So maybe 5 days after that incident, I was sweeping the path of the convent during Karma Yoga Day, and he was walking by with Swami Prabhavananda, and they were walking, and Swami Prabhavananda said something very sweet to me, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm sweeping the path for Holy Mother. And just he went, and then as Swami Prabhavananda walked down the path, I overheard him saying, "Oh, she's a good girl." And I was like, "Oh, he thinks I'm a good girl. I'm so happy." I was so fortunate to be in the company of someone who made it so obvious that God realization is a tangible reality, and that everyone has that capacity within them, with the infinite grace of God, which he and Swami Prabhavananda had endless debates about grace versus self-effort. They would have debates. Swami Prabhavananda always stood for self-effort. Swami Prabhavananda always stood for grace. And that became morning, noon, and night. And they loved each other intensely. And if they got bored, they'd just switch sides. But it was just that Swami Prabhavananda always emphasized grace, grace, grace. That grace is there, but you also need the grace of your own mind. He just really made it so possible to believe that even a shlemiel like me can realize that divinity within. I was still very young when he passed away, but when he passed away, the atmosphere in his room was electrifying, because he waited until, he said Maharaj had given him the boon to die when he wanted to. So he'd been in the hospital before, and he was quite ill, but he waited until July 4th. He wanted to die on July 4th like Swamiji. So he kept saying, "What time is it? What time is it? What time is it?" And then when it was after midnight on July 4th, then he said, "Maharaj has come. Maharaj has come." And he died. And you would have felt it'd be the saddest day in the world. And in a sense it was, but it was still like, it was almost like a festival atmosphere. People were singing and crying and happy, because the atmosphere, you absolutely felt that electrifying presence of the divine in the room. But then after a while, it's like, oh, who am I gonna ask? And I hadn't even joined the convent yet. I was too young. So I was very fortunate that at the memorial, all these wonderful sadhus came from all around the country. And one sadhu that I was particularly glad to see was Swami Ashayashananda, who was Holy Mother's disciple, who could scold on a epic basis. He would scold so loud that he would, even at the advanced age of late 80s, he would actually make the windows shake in a room. I happened to experience that and realized, as he was yelling at me and a few other people, that I'm not breathing. Why am I not breathing? I don't want him to notice me even more than he's noticing me already. Don't you ever sit down, get out, sit down, get out. You might wonder what prompted that. Yeah, good question. Well, 4 of us Santa Barbara nuns went up to Portland to have his darshan. Swami Ashayashananda was a very hands-on guy, because he was the personal secretary of Swami Shraddhananda. Not only was he Holy Mother's disciple who lived in Udbodhan and had to deal with the constant scoldings of Golapma, which were quite amazing, but he also was the personal secretary of Swami Shraddhananda, who had told him, Stand on your own 2 feet. Never be a leaning vine. Stand on your own 2 feet, which he took quite literally. God help you trying to shut the door of a car for him. He'd grab it. God help you trying to move something for him. No, God help you trying to do anything in that center, because it was his responsibility to do that in the center. So only if he told you to do something could you do it. But us Santa Barbara nuns, well, he said, Santa Barbara, spick and span, yes, spick and span, yes, very, very nice. Well, that not so much in Portland. It just, everything was done according to his own time schedule, and he always stayed up late, got up late, but the incense had kind of, in the shrine room, all the photos were like kind of brown from the layers of incense on it, and the curtains were falling apart, and the windows totally needed cleaning. So we thought, little nuns that we were, well, we could go in there before he starts running things up, and we could go in there and we can clean. We could do the windows, we can do the dusting, we can clean everything up. And then we heard, not knowing that in doing so, we are preventing the brahmachari from going in and setting up the puja, because he was not allowed to be anywhere near us. We had to be in separate places all the time. Didn't realize that because we hadn't checked with him. Fatal error. So he said, he asked one of the monks Swami wants to talk to you in the library. It's like, okay. So we go over there and we sit down around the desk, and it's like, we're waiting there. It's like, where is he? Then he comes in and said, get out! We stand up, sit down! We sat down. Get out! We stood up, sit down! And this went on 3 times. And that's when I realized I'd achieved kumbhaka, not breathing, just from sheer fear of that. He's going to, and I could hear the windows going zzz, zzz, zzz. It was like, holy mother, this guy's got some shakti going. So he was, then, okay, it is my responsibility. I've taken total responsibility. This is the center. You check my fee. Check with me before you do anything. You should have my permission, which is right. More than that, he was catching our egotism. Oh, we're going to make it better because they don't keep it up to snuff like we do. Caught red-handed with ego. Boom. The ego had gotten so in the way, boom, that he knocked that down. So poor Vera Edwards, who had brought us there, she was forbidden to go to the center for 14 days, which broke her heart. And our punishment was like we couldn't go sightseeing for a week, and we were going, thank you, God. Because we were so exhausted from being there, but he always said it's going sightseeing in the afternoon. We're like, oh, we're going again to the rose garden. Mind you, there were no roses in the rose garden because they would all been cut down for the season. They were like this tall with little tags on it telling you what breed they'd been or what their type was. So we were going around from stick to stick because he thought we needed to go. So when he said, forbidden to go sightseeing, it's like, okay, got it, all right, thank you. Maybe we can sit down and read for a change. But then he felt sorry for us, so later. But we took it. But he would often do that. He would yell at people, and you would realize that he was doing it for a reason. Once I had a really major problem. And I called him up and I said, Swami, this is happening. And he was dead, not a word. And the thing with Swami Ashayashananda, whether you're on the phone with him or you in person with him, he could sit in that chair, he would close his eyes and go like this. You could sit there 20 minutes in like the electric chair. No response. And then when he'd raise his head, he'd go, and his words would have such power and truth in them, you think. So when I called him up and I had to listen to the silence, and he said very gently, are you doing this? And I went, yeah, I didn't see the connection, but he did. He said, no, don't do that. It's like, that fixed it. He told someone that he never answered anything, a serious question, until he'd heard from Holy Mother about it. So he was waiting to hear what Holy Mother had to say about it. And then that's why his words had such incredible power and depth and truth in them, because no one else could have known the things that he knew. He was getting it from the source. I remember one of our nuns, I admire her so much. She's sweet, and she's humble, and she's self-effacing. She's truly a saint. She's modest. She's incredibly kind. She's like 6 months older than me. So I went to Swami, quite disturbed, Swami Ashayashananda. I said, Swami, how can I be humble like her? I want to be humble. He said, you are humble. I said, I am not humble. He said, you are too humble. It's like the fact that I'm arguing with him, which should let him know that I'm not humble, right? He said, I am not. Yes, you are. I said, I want to be like her. He said, no, you be yourself. And I learned a really important lesson. Being who yourself is openly is a great deal of humility. You don't try to clean it up. You don't try to make other people happy by acting like someone who you aren't. You be yourself. Thank you, Swami Ashayashananda. He also told me several things I never wanted to hear, and it's been the misery of my life. One of them is, I hate writing. I hate it. I've been through graduate school in literature. Pure torture. So I was saying goodbye to him and he always ran late, so you were always like trying desperately to make sure you could catch the plane, which was always like a last minute bang on the door, let me in, let me in. So that was before 9/11. So I went to him and I was saying my final goodbye. He was in the flower room. We're all on the linoleum together. My head is at his feet, on the linoleum next to his feet. And I've raised up my head and he said, I have given this much thought. It's like, okay. He said, you are to write. That is your dharma. And I went, I hate to write. I'm not going to write. No, it is your dharma. I'm not going to, yes, you must write. It is your dharma. It's like, oh, damn. So then I started writing. Pravrajika, who, bless her, just passed away a few days ago, was writing for Vedanta Keshari. And I said, Swami Ashayashananda just told me I had to write. Can you ask your Swami whether he would like to have an article on something so I can fulfill Mr. Big's desire? And she said, okay, I'll write him. So sure enough, that started it, and it hasn't ended since. I keep doing it because Swami Ashayashananda said that was my dharma. The other thing, he told me many things I never wanted to hear. The other one is like another occasion saying, getting my instruction from him. He said, study the Gita. Okay, no. And then his eyes narrowed and his voice got really cold. He said, no. Memorize the Gita. I went, what? And he said, I said, in English? He went, no. You memorize it in Sanskrit. It's like, what? Come on, man. It's not my first, second, or 12th language, right? Memorize it in Sanskrit? It's like, yes. And then he wrote out a couple of verses that he wanted absolutely for me to memorize. So for years, I walked around with a tiny little Bhagavad Gita in my pocket as I would heroically try to memorize. I still don't have it all memorized, but I did memorize portions of it. And to this day, I say, thank you, Swami Ashayashananda, because those verses are there when I need them, and they have really helped me. I drag them out the way you drag out a lasso when you need to catch a bull. They really help. It was another instruction in frickin' Sanskrit. It has really helped. It's really helped. And it's easier in Sanskrit because that's wonderful internal rhyming in the Sanskrit. And it has a power to it. And it's easy because of the rhythm of and especially when you put a tune to it, it's much easier to memorize than you think. I I recommend the practice as much as I was like, don't do that to me. He was astonishing. He was astonishing. He was, I asked him once, because I'm a stupid kind of person, the foolish go in where angels fear to try. I said, Swami, would you ever want to be reborn? Thinking, well, he was with Holy Mother. Wouldn't he want to see Mother? Wouldn't he want to serve Mother again? And he was quiet. He went, only if I could serve Swami Shraddhananda again. He was so kind. He said he was so kind. And anything Swami Shraddhananda ever said anything to him was so deeply imprinted on his memory. He said to us, he never scolded me. It's like, I'm looking for the connection here. And he said, and he went, Swami Nikhilananda made up for it. He ended up being Swami Nikhilananda's assistant, who was famous for tearing his assistants like, yep. And he kind of, and he laughed about his own scolding. He would scold us for being Americans. He would scold people for being Indians. He would scold you for wearing particular clothes. He would just rip you up one side and down the other. But when you had a really serious problem, he was the gentlest, sweetest person. In something like a big major problem, he was like a flower petal. He was the most understanding, kind, loving, sympathetic person you could ever imagine. He would do anything for people, like Swami Shraddhananda did, who would, during the plague, would go. He was the only person, including this woman's children, who wouldn't go and take care of her because she was dying of cholera. He went there, never caring if he was going to get cholera himself. Took care of her till she died. Swami Ashayashananda had that kind of love and care. Swami Ritajananda. See, I'm talking too much and I haven't even gotten to Swami Ritajananda. What a great soul. Disciple of Swami Shivananda Mahapurush Maharaj. He also had this incredible love that made you think, like, what else would I ever want to do but to see Swami Ritajananda smile? Because he had this amazing capacity to just sort of transmit the divine love that we all hear about and to have it be there. I visited him once when I was 18, and I went to the center, and he seemed rather stiff and formal, and you could tell he was sitting on a temper. I'd played the piano at an inappropriate time and broken some unwritten rule, so he's like, I could feel his but it was more than that. You could feel that he was, okay, good sadhu, he's a good sadhu. I came back a few years later. It was like he'd been this hard bud that all of a sudden had just opened up into this big, soft rose. So when I sat down and talked to him, I said, why are you so different? And he smiled and said, Sri Ramakrishna was kind to me. I asked their doctors, Dr. Bourdex, they didn't speak a word of English, what happened. And they said they thought he had died. He had either a heart attack or a stroke, I can't remember. But his heart had stopped. They thought he had died, no pulse. And then he came back. But when he came back, he was a very different man. He was a very different man. It was just like he'd become like the frozen butter that you get at the store, the Costco thing, and then he'd become like melted butter. And he was just almost incapable of seeing fault with anybody. There was this really awful woman there who was this wretched Belgian woman that was turning the place upside down. And everybody was complaining about her because she was, one human being is perfectly capable of creating chaos in an entire ashrama. Well, she was doing it really well. And people were even the saintly Krista, he said was his gift from Sri Ramakrishna. She did everything around the place, and always with a smile on her face. Disciple of Yatiswarananda. So she was there doing all this work. She said, Swami, something has to give. This is not working at all. She was a German woman. She said, she's causing chaos and everybody. He said, can't you see that she is a child? Don't you understand that children can't do any better? And she said she felt so ashamed. It was like, oh, yeah, of course you're right. You might remember this couple from the old days, Archie and Nina Stark. Remember them? Do you remember the story about Swami Ritajananda from them? Beautiful. Well, Nina had met Swami Ritajananda and had just fallen head over heels, like, he's got it. I've never met anybody like him. I really want to be initiated by him. So during the summer, she was initiated because that's when she wasn't teaching, and Archie came over too. And then Swami Ritajananda said to Archie, well, if you want, I will initiate you as well. And Archie just kind of pulled back. And then Swami Ritajananda said, and I heard this directly from them, Swami Ritajananda said, you know, Archie, you're right. Who knows whether this is all true? Who knows? You're probably right. Don't get initiated. It's fine. At Christmas time, he couldn't get him off his mind. He had to go back in the winter to get initiated. And so he went back. Because that ease with which Swami Ritajananda was capable, he was incredibly open-minded. It's like, you could be right. He was the most open-minded sadhu I ever met in my life. It's like, we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. Whatever you think is whatever you think, whatever path works for you, that is good. Yes, fine. That's wonderful blessings. So my Christmas vacation, he had to go over in the dead of winter to get initiated. At the end of Swami Ritajananda's life, he was quite ill. And Nina and Archie flew over. One sat on the one side of his bed, one sat on the other side of the bed. And he said, Archie, he said, it's true. It's all true. It's all true. And they wept. And that was a man that when he told you the sky is blue, you knew it was blue in the most intense way, because it was just truth kind of came out of him. I was very fortunate to have some real important matters in my life. He had suggested, Swami Ashayashananda suggested a spiritual practice that was the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. Even worse than writing, even worse than memorizing the Gita, something that was... So I asked Swami Ritajananda about it. And he said, yeah, well, Swami Ritajananda thought it was a good thing. And then, but I said, well, I don't think I have time for it. And Swami Ritajananda looked at me and said, what else are you doing with your time? And I was like, bam, bam, because of course he could read my mind. And what was in my mind was, well, I want to make sure that I have time for my walks. I want to make sure that I have time for doing this. I want to make sure that I have time for my personal time for doing that. He could see it in an instant. I was prioritizing my personal likes and whims and things that I like to do in the day over a spiritual practice. He caught it like that, busted, totally busted. It's like, thank you, Swami Ritajananda. So when your guru calls you on things, take it seriously. They're right. Not maybe even in a conscious way, but they're getting at something. And when we take it seriously, it makes all the difference in the world. I was very fortunate to have the blessings of Swami Shraddhananda in this life. He was so sweet and simple. He came to the convent fair. Oh my God. Just tell me when to stop.
Yes, I will tell you.
Okay.
Then don't stop.
Swami Shraddhananda came often to the convent, at least once a year, sometimes more, and he was so fun. He was a poet. He just enjoyed. He would say, God is peeping out of everything. He was a real nature mystic. He was a poet. He wrote beautiful poetry in Bengali. He was the editor of Udbodhan magazine for a long time. He was a real mystic. He was, again, another disciple of Mahapurush Maharaj, Swami Shivananda. So he just seemed like a really fun guy, very humble, very easy, very unassuming. So, and he liked to cook himself, and he liked to eat. Though he didn't eat a lot, he was a tiny little guy, but he could taste things very clearly and knew what needed to be in what. So Krishna Prana would make luchis, which he really enjoyed, and one of our devotees would make padishapta. It's like, padishapta. So one of the sadhus, when I was at Bellarmont, pulled me aside and said, we were talking, a bunch of us were talking in front of the mission office or someplace out there, I can't remember. But he pulled me aside and said, do you know Swami Shraddhananda? And I said, yeah, he's so fun. He just, he really likes luchis, and he likes to eat. And then he said, he said, no, japa siddha. He is perfected through the mantra. Like, you idiot. You think that he's a fun guy? Don't you realize what he is? Japa siddha. He's perfected through the mantra. Like, really? I had no idea. Because he's so humble and self-effacing. Yeah, on the far left there. So humble and self-effacing. I once asked him, I said, why do you hide yourself like that? I said, why do you keep everything hidden? And he said, oh, I'm not a big sadhu like Swami Lokeshwananda. I'm just a little Swami. I said, don't give me that. And he said, I like my quiet life. I like my quiet life. So I said to him, what happened? Was this because of you had such, he was Swami Ritajananda, the great first president after the direct disciples, a great mystic, tremendous mystic. And he was his private secretary for years and served him with all heart. And he said, I said, was it because you were with Swami Ritajananda? They spent so much time up in Shamlat all together. I said, is that when you really were able to get in? He said, no. Not in India. There's no time in India. He said, it was when I came to America. That's when my spiritual life developed. I went, you gotta be kidding me. And he said, no. It was when he became Swami Ashayashananda's assistant. When he was in San Francisco, spent a long time in Lima, and he became their mechanic, working on their trucks, going under the car and fixing the car. He said there was time there for japa and meditation. It's like, after you've been to India, it's like, oh my God, India's perfection. It's just so wonderful. It's like there, it's like everything. It's like, I was right here. It was like, I was a grease monkey, and it worked really well for me. It's a really good thing to remember. Spirituality is never out there. It's in here. It's like in here. It's where we're always put where we're meant to be. Where we are is where we're meant to lead our spiritual life, not somewhere else, not where we're going to get a better situation. Our better situation is right now at all times. He was the most joyful man. He'd been kind of like very careful as, quieter person. At his older age, he would dance and sing and dance and sing. He would go, shall I dance? And they'd put on some music and then he'd start. I saw him once in Bava. When I went to Sacramento, I was going to help with the cooking there for Jagadatri Puja. I'd never seen anyone with that kind of just right into it. It was just amazing. It was just so beautiful. And such humility and such kindness. He was one of the great students of the Upanishads, also a disciple of Mahapurush Maharaj. So he said that he was such a student of the Upanishads, he was really taken with the Mundaka Upanishad, with the study of Om. Om. So he went to Mahapurush Maharaj and said, I would like to stop using the mantra and just meditate on Om. And so Mahapurush said, all right. And then he said, afterwards, he would go in to make pranam, and Mahapurush would just turn his face away from him. And this went day after day. He wouldn't look at him. He wouldn't acknowledge him. And finally, this just was wearing down Swami Shraddhananda. What have I done? What have I done? What have I done? So he went to his buddy, Swami Apurvananda, Shankar Maharaj, who was Mahapurushji's attendant, and said, what have I done to offend Maharaj? And he said, you fool! He has given you Thakur's holy mantra, and you don't use it? You use your Om? You think that's good? You better go down and beg for forgiveness. So all of a sudden it hit him. He went to Mahapurushji, fell at his feet, begged forgiveness. And he said, Bimal, come with me, come with me. He took him over to Thakur's temple. Follow me. Went in front of Thakur's shrine. Lord, this is how you pray, Bimal. Oh Lord, give me devotion, give me faith, give me knowledge, give me purity. You go like that, you pray like that. Every day when he went for a walk in Sacramento, he would stand in front of Thakur's shrine and just stand like that. And I know he was doing that. That is how you do it with the holy mantra. And that it's kind of significant that the sadhu, who was like, no, I'm just going to do Om, and who had it like chewed threw away the holy mantra, became perfected through the mantra, perfected. He had the most amazingly creative mind. He would say, the mantra is like a vacuum. It goes into every dirty place in the mind and the heart, and it sucks it up. The mantra, it sucks it up. A friend of mine had just gotten initiation from him, and she was using her mala. So she said, Swami, this is really hard to use the way you've got me counted with my fingers like that. Why can't I do it and use my index finger? It wouldn't be so hard. And he said, no. Index finger, this is how you do it. You hold the index fingers like this. You have your mala here. You're doing your japa like that. And your index finger, that fellow here, he is the witness. He's going, aha, let us make sure she is doing it right. He is the witness. So when you see her and you remember, he is witnessing how you're doing your japa. And you have it right close to your heart as you're doing the mantra. That way, the mantra goes into the heart and the mantra goes into the bloodstream. So the mantra is going all throughout the body. The mantra pervades the body because you've put it right here, and this is the witness. What a creative mind. But he was perfected with that. He was so amazingly humble, and humble about himself. He was a volunteer for the 1926 convention, the first convention of the Ramakrishna Mission. And he was a volunteer. He was a student still. So he went to, and Maharaj was kind of doing the organizing. So Mahapurushji said to him, okay, I want you to go and you pick up this, I don't know whether it was pencils or something that he had to pick up, and you get that. And he was standing, waiting. He said, I see you're waiting for something. He said, Maharaj, aren't you going to give me some money? He said, you have money on you already, don't you? And he said, yes. He said, you're very attached to your money, aren't you? And he said, And it was like a knife in his heart because it was true. It was true. And he said, he removed that obstacle with me at that point. Pulled it out. Swami Swahananda was an entirely different kettle of fish. One of the most remarkable sadhus I've ever been fortunate to meet. He was the antithesis of anyone who would ever show spirituality. He, in the beginning, when he first came to this country, when he was in Berkeley, he would speak more openly about his spiritual experiences, and then something happened, he just like... So when he would talk in a lecture, he'd say, I like to listen to television. I like Hawaii Five-0. Or he would say, the other thing he liked was Francis the Talking Mule, and he was absolutely, she said, I like Perry Mason. But he went out of his way because he refused to be a sadhu who was going to be like somebody's playing monkey. So they would say, well, Swami, because he was constantly being compared to every other sadhu, and he was very much his own man. So he would go out of his way to try to be as even as possible. But I never saw a more humble sadhu, kind. He could be really impatient with people who were normal, but if you had any sort of a problem, any sort of a difficulty, any sort of mental illness that no one else had put up with, he would be infinitely patient. He had this woman, he wanted to have her stay with us, and she stayed with us for a while, but oh my God, she would walk around my room at night and set the dog off, and then she would cut her hair in the sink and would stop off all the plumbing, which was like no joke because we're on a septic system, like gotta get the guys out there, just like, and then she wouldn't eat with us, but she would squirrel all the stuff in her room, and so we'd get mice in there. I was like, oh my God. And then she left without letting anyone know. Like, okay, well that one's over. And then Swami Swahananda said she wants to come back, and our manager said, Krishna Prana said, you know, Swami, that was really tough. And he said, don't you have any compassion? And then we all felt like jerks, right? It's like, okay. And then she decided she wanted to be a Zen Buddhist. It's like, but he was, one of our monks told me that he had gone with Swami Swahananda on a trip. And uncharacteristically, he'd asked Swami Swahananda something about the experience of feeling the oneness of all existence, and that experience of knowing that you are Brahman, that you are the Atman, that sort of like defining experience that we're all longing for. And Swami, he said, did you ever have that? And he went, yes. He said, yes. Basically through the grace of Swami Prabhavananda, who gave that. He said, and I can come back to it whenever I want. But you see, he would never, ever, ever, ever reveal that on a normal basis, because he didn't want to be, the sadhu that you drag out for their holiness. He wanted everyone to feel comfortable with him, and he extreme dislike for any kind of show of spirituality. It annoyed the hell out of him. He felt he had tremendous humility. Once Stuart Maharaj had gone to Trabuco, and it was a big excitement because he'd been gone for such a long time. And so he invited another monk, Ganeshananda, who they'd been very close when they were in Trabuco together. And Ganeshananda was now up in Northern California. So he came down, and Stuart Maharaj, Amagyananda, had been invited to a dinner at a devotee's house. And so he just told Ganeshananda, just come along, it'll be great. They'll love to see you. Well, it turned out the devotee had no intention of having anyone else but Amagyananda and Swami Swahananda. They didn't want anybody else. So he was going to have to disinvite Swami Ganeshananda, who was considerably older than him and a man who he loved and revered. So he went to Swami Swahananda and said, what do I do? Can I just cancel? What can I do? Swami Swahananda, without batting an eye, said, blame it on me. Just blame it on me. See, I said he can't come. Most people will do anything to avoid being blamed, especially when it isn't required. Just blame it on me. He did things like that all the time, taking the blame, covering for other people. He said there was one monk he wanted very, very much to join, but headquarters was giving him a hard time. He said, I crawled on my belly for him. And that sadhu, who became a very fine monk, didn't know about it until I told him 20 years later. He cried when I told him that. I think headquarters is really happy now. He's became such a fine monk. I could keep talking, but I think you can tell that our life is enriched by what we learn from these sadhus. But if we want to learn from sadhus, we have to make ourselves available to the sadhus. We have to be there. This is something we really can't catch by reading a book. You know, a candle is lit from another candle. A light is lit from another light. So we have to go out of our way to really be with these sadhus, to put ourselves out, to learn, to ask them stupid questions. They're used to us. They're used to stupid questions. That's why they come, to serve. They're eager to give us all help. So please, I beg you, avail yourself of this opportunity and make your life as blessed and as radiant and as rich as it absolutely can be. Thank you.
Any questions? Anybody wants to ask something?
There is a web question.
Sure.
Wait a minute.
I see. Okay.
For posterity.
Were you not really surprised in 1975 when the Vietnam War finally ended?
I was gratified and sort of like, well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I was deeply, once I sort of got out of politics, I was just like, I realized what a dog's curly tail it is. You get your hopes up, and then you realize all the pieces will fall back again. And then we all get our hopes up over certain positive things. Like, remember when the Berlin Wall fell, and they said, oh, it's the end of war. It's like, oh, right. So they realize it's like this world is going to keep destroying, rebuilding, destroying, rebuilding, destroying. It's just the places move.
On a long enough timeline, there has to be an end to this process. No?
Well, when we leave the body.
Well, that's easy.
Not as easy as one would hope. Really. Not as easy as one would hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a web question.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yes.
The web question.
Okay. Pranam Mataji, thank you for this talk. Could you share with us those verses Swami Ashayashananda insisted you memorize?
Lift the self by the self. One should never betray the self. For the self is one's friend, and the self is also one's enemy. And by the self here, they don't mean the Atman. They mean the mind. That the lower mind has to be lifted by the higher mind. That there's nothing worse than being stuck in a mind where we're betrayed by our own thoughts, that the thoughts won't leave us alone. It's like the unwanted guest who won't leave, who will not leave the house. When we feel like it isn't giving us any peace. Then our higher mind has to be there to remind us of our real nature, to put our boat back in on the course again. That is the point of that, and he really emphasized that one above all else. I just recently ran into a verse that somehow appeared in my Gita in his handwriting that I didn't even know was there. And that was that the yogi, realizing their oneness of the Atman, realizes their identity with Brahman, and there comes supreme peace from that. And that was, well, that's kind of like a higher stage than I was kind of anticipating, but good. But I think as we progress in our spiritual life, we find ourselves, different verses will strike us at different times. One that always hits me is nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sataha ubayarapi drishtontva tvanios tatvadarshibhi. That the real always is. The unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. The wise are not deluded by this, are not confused by this. In other words, sometimes if there's a problem, it's like, whoa, I don't even know how to begin with this. I don't even know how to address it. And then you just have to pull back and go, okay, let's take a longer view. In the big picture, is this real? Or is it going to change? Is it transitory? Is this something that's going to change over time? In other words, nothing lasts forever. Everything changes. Nothing ever stays the same. So what seems to be an overwhelming, insoluble problem now will eventually, at some point, shift. So pull back. In the big picture, nothing I can do about it. Nasato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sa. That's kind of like, that's my last arrow in the quiver. It's like, okay, nothing I can do about it. There we go. Any other question? All right. Thank you. I enjoyed this so much because these memories have sweetened my entire life, and it brings me such great happiness to revisit them. So,
thank you, Vrajaprana ji. It was such a sublime joy to hear these accounts of holy associations and how one learns from it. It is considered the most effective way that one can learn spiritual truths in life, holy association. Sri Ramakrishna emphasized that, and in the aphorisms of Narada on devotion, he emphasizes this truth that how it can be done is Mahat Sangha, that the company of holy, that is how you learn it. The lecture was really very memorable and reminds me that what she said, that we should therefore be with holy people and learn from them. And we saw a holy person speaking just a little while ago. So we are very fortunate to have you come and speak. A few things that she said, let me speak about that. There are many here who have not met Archie and Nina. So let me tell a few words about them. I think Paul must have met them. Then maybe Himanshu might have met them. But I don't think anybody else here has the chance. Teresa might have met them, yeah. Nina and Archie, great devotees, and as she was talking about them, I personally had very time-wise very little association with them, but I see their brightly lit face, so much joy, and that the source of that joy, as she was telling, that holy association, fired with that ideal of Vedanta, that yes, that each soul, as it were, potentially divine. I am potentially divine. I am divine. That they didn't have to utter those words. Their presence, as it were, was telling that. Nina had written that great book. Both of them together actually joined in writing that wonderful book, The Gift Unopened. It is the book is out of print, but an excellent book on what Swami Vivekananda has brought to this country, and it's yet not fully opened. Gift unopened is, of course, the gift is very valuable, but this country is yet to open and use that gift. So that is the name of the title of that book, wonderful book. So that is about them. Second thing, she was telling about, Ritajananda, how she found that after her first visit when she went, he was so mellowed down, completely different person. And then he said, well, how you became so different, so austere, aloof, and kind of not easily approachable. How you became like this, soft butter, from the hard rock butter to a molten butter. How you became like that? And he is told that Sri Ramakrishna brought this change, his near-death experience, that change. And there are so many wonderful examples that such experience has changed the lives of people. But I am telling you another incident where this was done in a simple Vedantic way by Swami Madhavananda. I am telling you about Swami Madhavananda, one of our past presidents, and he was a scholar of Vedanta, and he was General Secretary before becoming President. And as he was General Secretary, he put on the air of being stern, and very brief. He would give probably the shortest answers to the questions. The question could be long, his answer would be very short, and yet very effective. It is not that big, long answers are more effective. His answers were short and very effective, very clear. He wouldn't let people just wait there standing for more words. Okay. So that kind of a person. Then he became president. And then all sadhus, this was narrated to me by one Swami who saw this change, that he has become now a very mellowed down person. As president of the order, very loving, caring, asking people on his own, hey, how are things with you? Yes, any problem? Okay, and so forth, very loving, inviting Swami. And he was wondering and asked him that, well, how this thing happened? And Madhavananda's reply was, you study so much Vedanta and you don't understand this. You see, it is the all-pervading Brahman, the reality is the same according to the limiting adjuncts, the upadhi. The Sanskrit word is upadhi. According to what it comes out, the manifestation changes. What earlier was that Brahman, that absolute, conditioned by being General Secretary. So the light was like that. Now that is changed to President. So it changes like that. The same electricity you feed it to a heater and brings out heat. Feed it to a refrigerator, it makes things cool. So something like that. So I wanted to share because I thought of this when she said, oh, how things changed. So things, change in that way because of the different role and because of the very, life-changing experience as going to the near death. So anyway, so I will now tell you about the upcoming programs. Next Sunday, again, we have a wonderful guest lecture by Swami Sarvapriyananda on the topic is so nice, it is dear to my heart, that the knower of Brahman attains supreme. That's the first line in the second canto of Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahma Vedapnoti Param, that the Brahman who realizes Brahman reaches the ultimate, the highest. He is going to speak on that, and he has tremendous pedagogical skills of teaching. He is the most popular amongst our Vedanta Swamis. So surely you will come for that. It is somebody was accusing when I said that, last Sunday it was speech by Reverend Father Clooney. Then this time now Vrajaprana. And now then Sarvapriyananda. So one Swami, when they heard this, many of our members were very upset. Not because, that they are going to listen to these great talks, but that is how, because I am getting vacation, they could not tolerate that, that I am going to have some relaxing time. That was not tolerated by them. So, you are getting too much vacation. So, the other programs during the week will go on as usual. Tuesday, Friday classes at 7:30 p.m. Tuesdays, it is on Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play. On Fridays, it is stories from Srimad Bhagavatam. And morning, evening meditation prayer sessions, they are also on. You have to come within the certain time range. For that, you can take the flyer and see that. So, okay, then I'll chant the concluding prayer, and then there will be the arati. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
is a form. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Looking at them, illusion is gone. Ocean of shining love and feeling, ever inebriated in your infinite love. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Your feet always dear to your devotees. From our boat to cross this world, revealed to us as God incarnate and the Lord of all things, helping us join with you. Your mind's always set in the divine light. Your mind's always set in the divine light. This we can see through your grace. Destroyer of our worldly sorrow and passion so infinite is your word. Your lives offered for the world's deliverance. Your lives offered for the world's deliverance, saving us from darkness and fear. Renouncer of all lust and lucre, therefore you were always spurning sensual life. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Grant to us pure love for you. You're fearless and you're free from doubting, with your mind very firmly resolved. Causeless refuge of your devotees, causeless refuge of your devotees, renouncing caste and birth. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Jaya Jaya for your worship divine. Hara Hara for your worship divine. Shiva Shiva for your worship divine. Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Auspicious and blessed graciousness sublime, all noble ends you give to us, granting us refuge, all-seeing Gauri, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Creation, preservation, dissolution are your powers, eternal one. Nature's real basis, nature's essence, O Mother Divine, our love to you. We come seeking refuge from anguish. Be our Savior through your deep concern. All our suffering remove, Goddess, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Victory, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother divine, our love to you. Jai Shri Ram Krishna Dev Ki Jai, Jai Shri Sarda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Shri Swami Vivekananda Ki Jai, Jai Shri Buddha Dev Ki Jai, Jai Shri Jesus Christ Ki Jai.